It's recording.
Here we go.
Okay. So, the goal for my comprehension lesson is I want my student to monitor his comprehension because that was something I didn't see any evidence of during the testing.
Okay.
So I want him to do that by creating questions as he reads. And just to make that a little bit more in-depth, I wanted to go over the thick and thin questions, like literal versus inferential questions. So that way it can lead to, the QAR and learning the different question types.
Okay.
So, and I want him to know the difference between literal and inferential questions so he can get to answering them eventually. Alright, so I want to first explain the strategy, like good readers do this, and why. Then, I want to talk about why you need to stop as you're reading and think about it, because he tends to just go right through and read quickly. And then thinking about that, even if you know the answer to a question, you can still write it as a question because it helps you think about the story. Then I'm going to introduce the thick and thin questions using that anchor chart I made. That's all before reading.
Okay.
Then, during reading, I'll model reading the first chapter out loud and pausing at certain points. So I already got it ready for myself, writing the questions on the Post-it note. Then at the end of the chapter, I was going to go back to the question, look at it, and model saying, oh, I think this is a thin question because, and trying to find the answer. I think this is a thick question because, and trying to find the answer for that. So then once that was done, once all the modeling was done, then we were going to do guided practice. I said I would read aloud the chapter and along the way stop because I think he still needs that practice. I think he'll still need my support at first for me to say, what question might you have at this point in the text? So after that, after he creates a few, doing that same process. All right, let's look back at the questions. Were they thick or thin? And what could your answer be? And then finally, him doing it all on his own. And basically, I would be kind of doing it too. So he'd be reading the chapter, he stops to write a question, I stop and write a question.
Okay.
And I think probably like that same strategy. What kind of question is it? Can you answer it? And then at the very end, like debriefing on the strategy. How does questioning help you as a reader? What are thick and thin questions?
Good. I'm just starting off. I think your after reading, just that debriefing session will really wrap it all up and bring it together for Damien. So tell me a little bit about your book selection. I know it's a chapter book, and is there any, what made you come about that one?
I picked it because when I was searching for a book that was the right Lexile level,
okay,
but still was looked mature enough for him. So this Lexile level was 390.
Okay.
So
that's his instructional?
Yeah, that's like a little below, that's like before second grade, and he's a first grade instructional level.
Okay. So
it is before, a second grade level. And I thought it would be high interest. He just finished third grade. It's funny. He likes humorous stories, and I really like the author Jerry Spinelli.
Okay.
I've read many of his books.
Good. So just tell me a little bit about when you start with your teaching. Chapter 1 you do together. So, you read aloud to him.
That's all modeling.
Kind of modeling it. Right. So you touched upon it a little bit with chapter 2 as you move into your guided practice. With reading aloud to him. Can you tell me a little more about why you chose to read aloud to him?
I thought it would just be easier for me to have that stopping point when I'm reading aloud to him, because I find that when he's reading aloud, he just wants to keep going, and it's hard for me to, keep butting in and stopping him. So I feel like if I'm more in charge of that, that will help with keeping him organized and not going, because he likes to tell stories about his own life. And
Now, that's when you're talking about you're reading and then stopping. Who's doing the stopping?
well,
How's that going to work?
hopefully he will, I see how it goes. Hopefully he will be able to say, oh, I have a question, or I wonder this. But if not, then if there is something in here that I've identified that, you could come up with a question about that, I could say, what question could you ask about that? Like, could you ask a thin question, just going back over, basic information, or do you have a more thick question?
Okay. Do you think there would be any other strategies to get him to the point of asking questions and realizing?
Yeah, I was also thinking, well, in terms of asking questions, I was also thinking about giving him some, like, like the question starter words.
Okay.
Or even just saying, what I wonder. Giving him those, like, sentence starters to get him to create the questions. And then tell me what the other part of that was.
Well, just more getting, I'm wondering about having him stopping, like how you were saying you're hoping that he's going to be able to stop and realize, like, oh, I have a question there and I'm wondering. Is there anything else, like, that you see yourself, like, we can do to help him?
Like, do it on his own?
Yeah. Do you want more independence with that?
I guess you could make a rule that you stop after every page.
Okay.
If they're not doing it. Or, I'm trying to think that, I know, it's tough because it really is just a personal thing when you do have a question. It could also be tied into, like, a prediction, like, oh, do you notice, are they giving you a clue somewhere? Maybe you can ask a question about what's going to happen next. So maybe I could give him some clues. Like, a good place to stop and ask a question is, then I could say a good place to stop and ask a question is when you get confused.
That's
when you're not sure what's going to happen, when you want to make a prediction. So
I'm wondering, like, that type of thing will actually help him realize that he needs to stop instead of it kind of be more aware of a reader that he's confused or be aware.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea. All right, so moving on. This is what I kind of just touched upon is developing those questions, and you answered that a little bit with possibly sentence starters.
Right.
Is that something you're going to kind of go with, or what are you thinking about with how he's able to develop questions? How are you going to help Damien be able to develop questions and ask questions? Because that's something, I think, as a reader, that's hard to do is to ask.
Hopefully the modeling would be one of the ways, and then during, like, the guided practice portion, I think if I can, give him, maybe I'll just pick a sentence starter. Okay, let's write a question that starts with what here, just to maybe get him in the practice of writing those questions. And then I find that once the students kind of get into it, like, once they have written a few questions, it comes more naturally.
Okay, good. So you mentioned in your plan about Post-its. Tell me a little bit about the Post-its, because I wasn't too sure.
Okay, so that was, as I'm, like, for the modeling, I already did it, but as we're reading chapter 2, let's say I read this first page out loud to him, and I say, okay, stop and write maybe an I wonder question, or a thick question you have, or a thin question you have. That's where, so quick, write down the question on the Post-it note just to keep track of it.
Okay, and is he writing the questions, or are you writing the questions?
He's gonna write them.
Okay.
Yes.
And
And just leave it on there, and then when we finish the chapter, go back and review it. Why is his name Suds? Okay, well, let me think. Then I would model, and this is what I want him to do too, is say, okay, well, that's a thin question.
Okay.
And have I found the answer to it yet? No, not in the first chapter. So that's what I'm still going to be looking for as I'm reading.
Okay. With the Post-its, are you going to, you might have said this, I kind of missed this, have him off to the side and he's going to get a Post-it when he's ready for a question?
Yeah, I was figuring I would
setup
just have, a pile for me and a pile for him, and as we're doing the guided practice and then eventually the independent practice, that it is. He finds us, he comes up with a question at a certain spot, and he pauses, he writes down a question on his Post-it, I write one on mine.
Okay.
That would be more the independent practice part. And then at the end of the chapter, we probably share our questions.
Yes. You kind of mentioned here too, just like if you're needing to ask him questions about saying like, hey, so it said this, is there something that you're thinking? Is there another way you can support him with that?
I'll have to think about it.
Like as a placeholder?
Like if he's
without-
not coming up with a question, what else can I do?
Yeah. Just as kind of, I'm wondering if there's something as a key to
Oh,
kind of
so
like,
if I
oh
want-
yeah,
if
I need
I
to be
wa-
thinking about a question.
Like a visual reminder or something? Okay, so maybe he could, he seems pretty good with tracking, but I even could have him have a index card with a question mark on it, and as he's reading, that would be his
I think
reminder.
that just may be kind of something on the page for him, and also just to make sure that he's developing questions as he's reading along, not necessarily giving a specific place, but just
right,
as a little
a
cue.
general reminder. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Good. So, kind of moving into your thin and thick questions. Tell me more, tell me your purpose for having Damien identify what is a thin question, what is a thick question.
Well, hopefully introducing, or maybe he already knows about it, introducing the idea that some questions, their answers can be found right there in the text. Some you have to use your, background knowledge to answer those questions. And so leading that into in future lessons, doing the QAR with the 4 different types of questions. So that way, to get him to be, so it's kind of like this lesson again is 2 parts. Monitoring your comprehension through questioning and learning the different types of questions so you can answer them.
Okay, and yeah, you do have that in your objectives. Good. So you're really using this lesson as a beginning basis for your inferential and text-based questions?
Yes.
Okay. So if he's able to say it's a thin question, where are you kind of going next with that? I'm wondering, like, where is this going to go in the future? In a way?
Well, if he has a lot of thin questions that can be answered in that chapter, then that's a good sign that he's monitoring his comprehension.
Okay.
So I'll say to him, that's good that you're asking these questions. That means you're checking on yourself as you're reading. And then if he's only coming up with thin questions while he's reading, then that's when we'll, I'll have to do a follow-up lesson just on, I haven't even introduced the term inference to him yet, but just the idea that some questions aren't right there in the book. You have to use what you know to try to answer them.
Okay, good. So this is kind of more of a monitoring strategy for him as a reader also, with what he's doing and what he's understanding as he's reading. Okay, good. I think we got through everything.
Okay.
I think your lesson feels good, and
Okay.
we'll see how it goes.
Oh, and something that I'm always wondering about is if I do too much teacher talk.
Okay.
And if I'm losing the student during that time. So that's
Can you tell me a little more,
if I'm doing too much, good readers do this, and I'm going through the strategy, and if that's when he's starting to get off task.
okay,
So
too much of an explanation about what to work on?
or not keeping it concise enough for him. So some data I'm interested in is how long am I spending on teacher talk?
Okay, so how do you want me kind of...
I think
Time,
yeah, you
or-
could just time maybe how long my little before reading activity goes.
Your explanation of all of it and your introduction to it?
Yeah, the introduction.
Okay.
I think that would be
Anything
good.
else you want me to...
Well, during modeling, it is going to be a lot of me talking.
It is, yes.
So that's kind of expected. I'm trying to think if during guided practice, maybe also keep
Okay.
track of
Yeah.
how much I'm interjecting. Like if I'm always,
Good.
taking his turn. Hopefully
Okay.
not.
Yeah.
But just make sure I'm keeping it more concise that he can really get into his
Great.
thinking.
I can definitely keep that for you and
Okay. Yeah, I think
see.
that would be it.
Wonderful.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.